All right, we mentioned before that chords come from scales, and so a G major chord would come from a G major scale. A C major chord can also come from a G major scale, being built on the 4th degree of the scale, as does a D major chord, also from a G major scale. The G major chord is built from the 1st degree of a G major scale, C major chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, built from the 4th degree of a G major scale, and then the D major chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is built from the 5th degree of a G major scale. Now, let's take a look at some of the chords that we've done so far, the altered chords as well, and take a look at some stuff that we can do with this chord progression of G, C, and D. So here's G, and then we're going to go to a C add 9, because it's a nice easy change. And then we're going to go to the D major chord, which has the 3rd finger in common. All right, and then we'll add the suspended 4th and come back to the G. All right, let's try that, and let's have a listen to what this sounds like. So let's begin with G, C add 9, D, sus, G, C add 9. That 3rd finger is always in common. Sus. Okay, let's try a different grouping. Let's do or a different progression. We'll do G, C add 9, D, D2, and then D4. And we'll split the measure. You'll hear it. Here we go. D, there's lots of different ways you could play those 2s and 4s. D, you can hear that. So that D chord has some movement in it now because of the suspended 4th and the 2 chord. And we've also got that static voice between the G chord, to C add 9, to D, right? That D remains there. It's a common voice between each of those chords. Now, we don't have to change anything with our fingering. All we have to do in order to get something completely different going on, we can just start in a different place. We'll start on the D and go from the D to the C add 9 to the G to the C add 9, right? Same chords, but now it's going to sound different because we're emphasizing D as our tonic or tonal center. D, C add 9, G, C add 9, right? Different sound only because we've switched the tonal center a little bit. So let's just recap. What we've got is G to C add 9 to D. And then in every case, we're keeping that D note in common between each of the chords, right? G, C, D, with that common D voice, and then returning back to the G. And we've also used the D, sus, 2, returning to the G. Then we use exactly the same progression, the same chords, I'm sorry, not the same progression, the same chords, and just turn everything around the D as the tonal center. And always maintaining the stability of that common voice of D between each of the chords. That common voice of D wouldn't be there if we weren't playing a C add 9 chord. It's that add 9 that gives us that, that anchor there, both tonally and technically. Technically meaning, the physical part of playing, tonally meaning what we're hearing. All right, so that's a really useful progression, and we're going to explore that a lot more as we move forward.